Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Lauren.
And of course, I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark.
Dark.
Paradise After Dark is an independent podcast covering true crime,
Unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
urban legends,
and strange places.
And please be sure to check out our website,
ParadiseAfterDark.com. On the website, you'll find links to all of our episodes, even the archived episodes, our mailing list, merch store, links to our social medias, and of course, our Patreon.
And on our website, we also have a virtual tip jar. So if you want to swing by there and help out the show, you can leave us a tip and we'll give you a shout out.
Yes, and we are having our 5-year podiversary next month on March 26th at Mission Hill Barbecue in Fort Myers, Florida. So if you are interested in attending and coming to celebrate with us,
I'm ready for it. This is going to be exciting stuff. That's 5 years.
5 years we've been doing this.
5 years. And we've kind of, it's a, the thing about the 5 years, it seems like a long time, but in that 5-year span, we've morphed this thing so many times.
I know. So if you're interested in joining us, if you're local to Southwest Florida, or if you feel like traveling, we're going to put a link in the show notes to purchase a ticket. The ticket is just to cover the food. We're having a barbecue buffet. Other than that, chill, hang out, celebrate.
Yeah, and the tickets are cheap? They're like $522?
$20.
Oh, $20. I'm sorry.
Because we're getting an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yeah, so basically $20, you can come eat all the barbecue you want, and then you can see our beautiful faces.
Yeah.
So that should be fun.
All right, so Ken.
Lauren, this week could creep some people out. Because the case we're covering now. One thing I must say is anytime we talk about clowns, you get half the people that will automatically go to thinking about a good clown in their life, and then some people will think about something that's scary. And in the true crime world, as soon as someone thinks clown, they think
Pennywise?
Pennywise.
Oh, no.
I didn't say in the book world. I said true crime world, Lauren.
I'm sorry. I'm a big Stephen King fan.
I know. She's literally in the middle of a book right now. So
John Wayne Gacy.
Thank you. Pogo. So
sorry.
When I say that, as an adult, I'm just going to give you a quick little story and then I'll get into this because I like to just babble. Which, if you signed on to our Patreon and ever listened to any of our off-topic uncuts, you'll know Ken talks a ton.
Yeah,
there.
He doesn't shut up.
I don't. Lauren, sometimes. Can I talk tonight? No. If maybe. But anyway, so as an adult, I've learned this. There are, and like I just said, there are good clowns, bad clowns. But if you think about Bozo the Clown, and some of you guys are too young to know Bozo. Now, Bozo had the grand prize game, which was on, I think it was WGN. It was a Chicago show. You familiar with Bozo the Clown? He had the big hair. Well, he had another partner clown. His name was Cookie.
Can I tell you something really quick?
Yeah.
My uncle used to have an afro, and me and my sisters called him Uncle Bozo.
Well, because Bozo the Clown. It worked.
Yeah.
Well, Bozo was he was amazing. I loved watching him when I was a kid. I loved watching his show on WGN, the Chicago station. I think that was WGN. Correct me if I'm wrong. But as an adult, I've learned Cookie, if you look at Cookie's face, it was kind of sad. And he was almost like villainous, where Bozo was like this really happy, but Cookie was always out to get Bozo, to try to make Bozo look silly and did these little tricks. Obviously, it was all a skit. But if you look, I kind of look at it now and I'm looking at Cookie, I'm like, kind of a villain, Cookie, as opposed to Bozo, who's wanting to be really good to the kids. But either way, if you didn't know who they were, as a kid, I think now it would scare a kid if you looked at either one of these clowns. And that kind of brings us into what we're discussing this week.
All right. Well, it's been 32 years since 40-year-old Marlene Warren opened the door of her home in Wellington, Florida, and was shot in the face by a person dressed as a clown, bearing flowers and balloons. One balloon reportedly bore a picture of Snow White, and the other was emblazoned with words, "You're the greatest." On May 26, 1990, Marlene was having breakfast with her son Joseph and 3 of his friends. At around 10:45 a.m., there was a knock at the front door. Marlene answered, and the last thing Joseph remembers hearing was his mother say, "How nice," seconds before hearing a loud bang. When they looked up toward Marlene, they witnessed the murderous clown calmly walking down the driveway and fleeing in a white Chrysler LeBaron with no license plate. They ran to the front door to find Marlene slumped over on the ground with large amounts of blood everywhere. 4 days after the shooting, the Chrysler LeBaron was found in a Winn-Dixie parking lot at the intersection of Okeechobee and Royal Palm Beach Boulevard. Neither the costume nor the gun was ever recovered, and Marlene died at Palms West Hospital on May 28, 1990, just 2 days later.
Now, several of you who have listened to us forever, which we very much appreciate. Now, a few years ago, if you remember, we did an episode about Wrinkles the Clown. He's the infamous Florida man who worked as a creepy clown for hire. He was kind of a local legend, but he was a retiree who showed up in a terrifying clown suit to scare the pants off anyone you ask him to, even your misbehaving child. He kind of focused on that, was kind of pushed as he would scare your kid, into believing things. Now, the story and the accompanying YouTube videos of Wrinkles and his little stunts that he pulled, they went viral. And you can still see him, I think, if you look today. But we covered that case a few years back.
So the first thing I want to kind of dive into before we get really deep into this case is, why are clowns so scary?
I think I told everybody earlier, Cookie had a sad face.
According to the Child Mind Institute at childmind.org, clowns have been a dependable, if not perplexing, source of fear for decades, with horror stories like Stephen King's It transforming children's entertainers into sadistic murderers. But the fact is, clowns are frightening to many people even without the help of the King of Horror. They have a specific phobia of clowns, also known as coulrophobia. I think we talked about that when we covered Wrinkles the Clown.
We did. We discussed it there.
Coulrophobia. Some psychologists believe that the fear is in part due to the fact that we cannot read genuine emotions on a clown's face. When you take away our ability to read someone's expression, it's disturbing because we don't know what they're feeling. Are they happy, sad, angry? What to expect or how to react, explains Jerry Bubrick, a clinical psychologist who specializes in treating children with anxiety at the Child Mind Institute. As adults, clowns are thought to make us uncomfortable because they look almost, but not quite like real humans, a hypothesis called the uncanny valley, which applies to mannequins and human-like robots too. By wearing a clown suit, we can only imagine that Marlene Warren's death was just that much more terrifying.
She went from being happy and like, oh my God, this is exciting. How nice, which was the last thing she said, to this horror story. I mean, it was instantaneously. Well, Marlene and her husband, Michael Warren, they married April 27th of 1972. Now, Michael Warren owned a Bargain Motors used car lot and a rental car company. Well, they kind of owned them together along with a few other things. But they lived in the affluent community of Aero Club in Wellington. Now, this is on the outskirts of West Palm Beach on the east coast of Florida. It's a subdivision that has a runway for residents to land personal aircrafts in their own backyards. So
that's money.
That's money. Now, Marlene was a pretty successful woman herself, and the majority of the assets we found were in Marlene's name. According to Chilling Crime website, Marlene owned and managed multiple rental properties worth roughly $1 million. She also owned a car rental business, which she owned with her husband, and she owned an airplane and a racehorse. And she also, at times, had worked as a cargo ship inspector. So she was very into it.
She was hustling.
She was hustling. Now, Marlene and Michael Warren were married for 20 years, and according to attorney Chris DeSantis, he never thought there were any problems in the Warrens' marriage, which seems an odd statement considering that a year before Marlene's death, Michael asked DeSantis what would happen to a woman's estate if her husband killed her. Now, this seems to confirm where the money was in this marriage. Now, the answer DeSantis gave could easily have given Michael this idea to get away with the murder. He told him that if he was convicted of murdering his wife, he wouldn't get anything. But if he were convicted on a lesser charge, he would actually get the estate. But if he had a friend kill her that could be tied to him as an accessory, he would get away scot-free. On another occasion, DeSantis told police he remembered telling Michael that a killer dressed as a clown would most likely get off because witnesses wouldn't be able to tell if the clown were male or female. Now, Marlene's own son, Joe Aarons, who looked at the clown in its deep brown eyes as his mother lay fighting for her life, couldn't even be positive if the clown were a man or a woman.
So this guy's lawyer, this DeSantis fella, didn't think there were any problems in the marriage, yet he's discussing murdering wives with Michael Warren and talking about dressing as a clown, and then, suddenly Marlene Warren is killed by a clown.
Yeah, as someone's attorney, I think they should probably watch their words until they start, just get to know somebody a little better, even if you do. Probably not a good thing to say at all.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, investigators first turned to the husband, Michael. Why, Lauren?
Because it's always the husband.
Well, he actually told police that he was with two of his friends and they were headed to the Miami racetrack. And they confirmed that he was miles away when the murder occurred. He was with two friends and they were literally headed to the racetrack to bet.
Well, a woman named Sheila Keene was then a suspect in the murder, as it was rumored that she was having an affair with her boss, none other than Marlene's husband, Michael Warren. The two denied being involved in a relationship at the time of the murder. Sheila and her husband Richard owned a repo business and worked for the Warrens at their used car lot. Michael hired them just 5 months before Marlene was brutally murdered. Although there was no solid evidence to convict Sheila, the balloons the clown was holding on the doorstep of the Warrens' home were purchased at a Publix grocery store only half a mile from Sheila's home. Sheila had separated from her husband in January of 1990 after filing domestic violence charges against him for grabbing and threatening her. Her new apartment was allegedly paid for by Michael Warren. Neighbors say that Michael and Sheila were seen together frequently.
Which could all be explained because they worked together.
Right. Well, not him paying for her apartment.
Well, I understand that, assuming that information was evident. But that was actually said by the employees of Michael.
Okay.
Later on, obviously, after all of this went down. But that stayed pretty hush. Well, unrelated to this case, let's fast forward a little bit. Michael Warren faced some trouble with authorities as he was arrested. He actually turned himself in March of 1994 and convicted on 43 counts of racketeering, odometer tampering, and grand theft. Now, Michael had been taking in these used cars that he got in as trade-ins or purchased from the auction and began to roll back the mileage on the odometers just to be able to sell the cars at a lesser price. And he was also involved in some other shady practices involving his used car lot. Now, one claim that I found was Michael sold the car to a man and then turned around and stole the car back under the premise of being repoed. So he sells it to him, finds it, steals it back. Okay.
And then I think he resold it, didn't it?
Later
to someone else?
He tried to resell it to someone that the guy was related to. Now, deservedly so. He did get some time in prison, and he did 3 years. I think he didn't get out till it was like 1997.
On August 15th of 2002, 12 years after the unsolved murder of his wife, Michael Warren remarried in Las Vegas. His bride? None other than Sheila Keene. They relocated to Tennessee and opened a restaurant called the Purple Cow, then sold the restaurant and moved again to Virginia.
Well, some of these reports claim that once they moved away from Florida, Sheila's name actually became Debbie Warren to all the friends and neighbors. So she changed her name, and now she's no longer Sheila Keene. She's Debbie Warren. She's not even Sheila Warren. And this is probably, obviously, to keep anyone in their circle from recognizing her name from any of the news stories or bringing up any of the questions, obviously. In 2014, the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office reopened Marlene Warren's case after they received a grant for unsolved murder cases. A task force was then formed with the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, the state's attorney office, and the FBI. And investigators re-interviewed witnesses, reviewed evidence, and submitted DNA for analysis that wasn't previously available. I mean, the DNA was available, but the means of testing were not. So now they have an opportunity, which I love it when law enforcement, even going back to some of the old cases, you get into the 60s and 70s where they saved some of this, like whether it be a blood or something to
Golden
where
State Killer?
exactly to where these could be tested later on. It's almost like they're like, look, we don't have the technology to do this, but they can foresee in the future. Like at some point in time, we might be able to test this and find things. And fortunately, I mean, there's several programs now that my favorite, I think, is DNA Unsolved. It's at David Middleman. If you don't follow him on Facebook, you should.
Yeah.
It's David Middleman. And they do amazing work, but they're like, they're solving cases. They are identifying people that were unidentifiable, bones that were found, remains were found. So I just love it when law enforcement is smart enough to put this stuff in their pocket and say, okay, let's hang on to this stuff. And later on, we might be able to check it out. So what they found were some orange fibers that they found in the car. Now, those allegedly matched some orange fibers in Sheila's apartment. We can only assume that this was from the wig of the clown. They also found matches between her actual hair and the hair found in the Chrysler LeBaron. Now, this is the car that, remember, that the clown drove when the murder took place. Now, this particular Chrysler LeBaron was connected to Michael Warren's car business. How do you ask? Well, let me tell you, Lauren. And I'm also going to give you an idea of just how shady Michael's business practices were and explain how this white Chrysler LeBaron became connected. Because remember we talked about he got arrested for racketeering, grand theft, and all these other things.
Yes.
Well, this is just a story that was later told by one of the employees of Bargain Motors. Now, I know the guy's name. I'm not going to say it. It's not important. Well, he told investigators about an incident that occurred roughly 45 days prior to the murder. He tells a story of this couple that had rented the Chrysler LeBaron from a company called Payless Car Rentals, and they were looking to return it. But the day they got there, they're trying to return the car to Payless, but the Payless that they were at was closed. So they phoned what they thought was another Payless car rental location to inquire as to what to do. So they mistakenly called Bargain Motors because of a mix-up with the ad that Michael had placed in the phone book that used the word Payless written largely. Right? Now, thinking that they had called the correct place, they asked, hey, what do we do? Well, they were instructed by what they believe now to be Michael to leave the keys in the visor and that they would take care of it later. Hey, we're closed. Nobody's there. Just leave the keys in the visor. Not a problem. We'll take care of it. So the employee claims that he then drove Michael and Sheila to this particular Payless car rental lot. At this time, they get out. They get into the white LeBaron, get the keys, and then he observed them driving away with the Chrysler LeBaron. So when the couple calls back later and says, hey, we messed up. We called Payless and they didn't get the car was never returned. They want to know where the car's at. We called you guys said what to do and it's not there. And the guy on the phone who they claimed was the same guy they spoke to, I guess they recognized the voice, and the employee said it was Michael. He said he had no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Now, Michael was sued. Bargain Motors was sued by Payless for the ad that he ran in the phone book because he used the same font, same size, everything as Payless Car Rentals and Bargain Motors, where it said Payless Bargain Motors. So he was trying to pull a sly one. So to give you an idea, and that story was told by the people that rented the Chrysler LeBaron originally, because obviously they were investigated too, because they were the last people to rent the car. The car comes up missing. Nobody can find it, and it's involved in a murder. Then they find it a few days later in the Winn-Dixie parking lot.
With no license plate on it.
Exactly. So that's the kind of thing, to give you an idea of where the Chrysler LeBaron falls into place.
So
in this case.
The Chrysler LeBaron was stolen from Payless rental car.
What?
By Michael and Sheila Warren.
According to the employee of Michael when he was actually interrogated by investigators.
Okay. Well, with so much time passed, investigators are now facing an uphill battle.
Of course.
Like we just mentioned. They're reopening the case. Some of the original witnesses had passed away or could not be located. Authorities reviewed witness statements, including those of Dina Rosales and Debbie Offred, the two clerks from the costume shop where the clown costume was purchased. They told authorities in May of 1990 that a woman fitting Sheila's description showed up at the costume store just 2 days before Marlene was killed. The woman told the clerk she urgently needed a clown suit, an orange wig, white gloves, and enough white makeup to cover her face completely. In May of 1990, they were shown a lineup containing 6 possible suspects. Dina identified the woman that came into the store as Sheila Keene. Debbie chose both a photo of Sheila and another photograph, unable to make a positive identification. Apparently, that just wasn't enough to charge Sheila with murder at the time. But, as we spoke of earlier, there was new DNA analysis on the evidence, and it was found that Sheila was linked to the Chrysler LeBaron that was used in the murder. In 2016, FBI testing confirmed the brown hairs found in the getaway car were consistent with Sheila Keene Warren's.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, the orange hairs did, in fact, match the wig. Or
yes.
the fibers that they should say, rather, that were, found at her apartment. So there's a lot of stuff going right now. It's not looking good for Sheila, and I think finally maybe there's going to be some resolution, but we'll talk about that some more right after a quick break. Okay, so on August 31st of 2017, the case was presented to a grand jury that issued an indictment for first-degree murder, and an arrest warrant was issued for Sheila Keene Warren. Now, on September 26th, 2017, this being 3 years after the case was reopened, Sheila was arrested at her home in Abingdon, Virginia, for first-degree murder of Marlene Warren. Now, neighbor Brooke Blevins was shocked. Oh my goodness, but she's a good person. It's got to be a misunderstanding. Something is not right. It's just so out of character from what I know her to be. This is what she told Wish TV. Now, the day after her arrest, can we just call her Keene?
Yeah.
I don't want to call her Warren.
Well, it's technically Keene-Warren, but yeah, you can just call her Keene.
Yeah, because I don't want her to be associated with this whole Warren thing.
Okay.
She's a clown killer. Or killer clown.
Killer clown.
So anyway, the day after they arrested Keene, she waives extradition in Virginia, and she's expecting to return to Palm Beach County to be booked into the jail. Now, Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg announced the penalty for Keene, if convicted, will either be life in prison or they're going to push for the death penalty. Now, on October 4th of 2017, they announced that they would, in fact, seek the death penalty. So they must feel like they have enough to go for the death penalty.
Yeah. Well, a year after her arrest, the prosecutors released a list of evidence they had against Keene, which included a clown costume, hair fibers, a cigarette butt, and a Publix receipt. We can only assume that any or all of these items contain the defendant's DNA, and obviously a Publix receipt. If she had purchased the balloons at Publix that was right around the corner from her house.
Well, at the time, the investigators did actually go to Publix because Publix was the only place that sold those Mylar balloons that were delivered.
Oh,
so they went back to Publix, that particular type. So they went back to Publix and they did talk to some people, and that's when they figured they were looking for a female because the witnesses said that, yes, I remember this. It was a woman that came in. I specifically remember she paid with a $100 bill, and what I found odd was she paid me with a $100 bill in cash. So they thought that was at the time because she had on gloves.
Oh.
So they thought that was kind of weird. So obviously she bought the balloons like immediately prior to probably committing the murder, assuming she's guilty.
Well, Sheila Keene's trial has been delayed at least 7 times. Sheila's defense claimed the evidence is flimsy and the clown wig hair should not be used as evidence in the trial. They also argued that the state had the wrong car.
Yeah, don't use the hair fibers that you found in the wig. Why? Because they implement my client. Well, the last time it was postponed in October of 2022 was due to the disclosure of a law enforcement file containing information about other clown sighting leads at the time. Now, prosecutors informed Sheila's defense attorneys that they had found a clown sighting file, which defense attorneys had been demanding, but prosecutors had been saying they didn't have it. Now, this is according to a court filing by defense attorneys in Palm Beach County. The 25-page clown sighting file has the names, addresses, and phone numbers of 40 credible leads, according to the court filing from the defense attorneys. Needless to say, this will take the defense considerable time and resources to investigate. That's what the defense attorneys were saying.
So there's possibly 40 other That's what the defense is getting at here.
That's the defense's job, right?
Well, yeah, it is. 40 other possible suspects. I find it very hard to believe that there were 40 clown sightings in that immediate time frame, in that immediate area of the murder.
Well,
but it doesn't say any more than clown sighting file.
Some places, or one place I should say, rather, I can't remember where it was, but I read that the police were doing their due diligence by checking out clown sightings, and that was part of the investigation that they were doing at the time, where they were trying to figure out all these clown sightings that were happening at the time. And of course, they were investigating them, which is smart. I mean, okay, we got a clown that comes in, commits a murder. Okay, well, let's start looking into all these clown sightings, whatever it is, whether we saw a clown that was at a store shopping and somebody called and it was suspicious, whatever. So they were investigating all these clown sightings. Why? Because they had just had a clown that committed a murder and they're looking for the suspect. So the law enforcement was doing their due diligence. That's what I read.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Now, if you read some stories that kind of lean more towards the defense's side, they're saying, well, that's, the law enforcement was hiding all of this information. That's going to give the defense all of these opportunities to say, hey, it was this guy, but it was literally a file of information. And of course, the problem with it was not given to the defense. I don't know what's that called where they have to give all this
discovery.
There it is. There's that fancy word. That's not a fancy word, but Ken just couldn't think of it. But so it wasn't turned over in discovery. And that is in fact what the problem is. This file comes in after the fact. And now they're like, oh, well, we have to investigate this. So they continue. But it was just the police doing their due diligence as they should have. You had a clown commit a murder. What do? You start looking for clowns. Until you have more bases to follow, you look for clowns.
Well, it's just that they made it seem like, oh, well, there were all these different clown sightings. There's all these different people running around dressed as a clown in the time frame and the area of the murder.
Well, there were, but they were just in different aspects, so. But
oh my God. Okay, we need to move on. So Sheila Keene is still being held without bond in the Palm Beach County Jail. She denies murdering Marlene Warren and has pled not guilty. She has spent the last 5 years in protective custody, essentially on 23-hour lockdown, as she fears being harmed by other inmates. Why would she be afraid of being harmed by other inmates?
If I was in prison, I would constantly be in fear.
But, okay.
Just because I'm scared to be in prison. Maybe she's just scared to be in prison.
But I mean, I understand, like, child killers and child molesters and stuff, they all get ganged up on in prison, but she really has, I'm sure there's lots of women murderers in jail and prison that aren't on 23-hour lockdown.
It's hard to tell. It could be because she's in the same county as she lived. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe she knows people.
Well, as of January 12th, 2023, her trial is set to begin on May 12th of this year. Sheila Keene is still behind bars and has not been granted pretrial release. But there's something else we need to look at.
What's that, Lauren?
What if Sheila really is innocent? In 1991, a man serving time in prison in Maine wrote a letter to Palm Beach County detectives claiming his cellmate, Edward Barr, confessed to murdering Marlene on the doorstep of her Wellington, Florida home in 1990. He said 2 weeks prior to the murder, a guy had come to the Mermaid Bar in West Palm Beach looking to hire a hitman. Ed told his cellmate that in broad daylight, he dressed as a clown, then approached the door of the residence, knocked, said delivery. She opened the door. Ed said, "Ha ha," pointed the pistol at her face and killed her. This prompted Bill Williams, lead detective in the case, to fly to Maine to question Barr. Ed had his own questions for the detectives and was quoted as asking, "If I tell you what I did, will I get the electric chair?" Williams could not make that promise, which led to Barr asking for an attorney and invoking his right to remain silent. After Barr's release, detectives did travel twice to Texas to search his garage and also jailed him for contempt when he refused to answer their questions about the alleged confession. When Sheila's defense attorneys demanded to know why prosecutors never told them about their interviews and the search of Barr's property, they told them that Barr didn't have any useful information. which is why it doesn't make sense that they are still investigating the bar lead, even after Sheila Keene has been incarcerated for 5 years. But unfortunately, none of the recorded calls Ed Barr made while incarcerated were saved to a disk, and as a result, lost forever. They really don't have anything to connect this guy to anything, so it looks like Sheila Keene Warren is the only one being prosecuted for this case.
But what it did for me was it brought up a little flag.
Reasonable doubt.
So, and here is where this trial can get tricky. And tell me if I'm wrong, Lauren, because you know way more about the law than I do. You bring this situation up. Now, we don't have Michael in prison. We have Sheila in prison, correct?
Right.
What if, in fact, he is not telling a lie? Maybe he was in a bar in West Palm Beach. If I was a defense attorney, this is how I would put it. And again, I'm only bringing this up and putting this out there. This is not how I feel personally. I'm bringing it up because we said, what if she is innocent? So what if this gentleman here, or this guy, whatever we want to call him, he's at a bar and he does run into a man, Michael Warren, who says, I'm looking for a hitman to kill my wife. Remember, he did ask his attorney the questions about, hey, what happens if my wife were murdered? Well, it has to be by a stranger. No one that can connect you to you. So Michael goes in there, talks to Mr. Barr and says, hey, I need somebody to kill my wife. Okay, how do you want it done? This is exactly how I want it done. I want you to show up with a balloon, dress in a clown uniform. You're going to do this. I've got a card for you. Do all this. Gives him all the map of everything that happened. So that's the only reason that he knows how this happened is because Michael Warren was trying to hire him and gave him the plot of what's to go down. And the guy said, you know what? I can't do this. I'm out. He leaves. Later on, he's telling this story to somebody else, which this guy calls and implements him. And of course, they fly up and they talk to him. And this is the story that he gives. Will I get the electric chair? Like, in other words, I talked to this guy about this. And maybe he felt guilty at the time. Maybe he was really drunk or on drugs and thought that maybe he did because he had heard this story. And I'm thinking that may be an angle that the defense could use if, in fact, they had this disc. So in my opinion, I honestly 100% don't necessarily believe that Michael is as innocent as we think.
Oh, I don't think he's innocent at all.
Well, I mean, we really haven't brought that into it. And I was waiting to bring it up at this point because of the information that this gentleman, this guy, is providing. Kind of sounds like maybe, in fact, he was trying to be hired as a hitman. He couldn't get the job done. They couldn't figure out how to do it. Sheila is leaving her husband. She wants to be with Michael. So she's like, you know what? Screw it. I'll do it. And here we are. So, and that's my opinion. That is my uneducated guess. I'm just putting information out there based on things that I've learned in this particular.
Ken is just, didn't we say at the beginning of this episode he likes to run his mouth?
I do. I'm telling you guys, if you want to hear Ken run his mouth, sign up for Patreon. If you don't, don't. Stay away. Well, there's one thing I want to bring up, and you know me, Lauren, I always talk about other victims in the case, and obviously we still have
the ripple effect.
We still have victims in this case. One, all of the people that loved Marlene. I mean, she was really involved in her community. I mean, she had these rental properties. People knew her. She was, all in all, everything that I could find. People just loved her. She was a great person. And Marlene had been previously married to another man. His name was John Aarons, and they actually had 2 sons, John Jr. and Joseph Aarons. Remember, Joseph was the one who was having breakfast that morning with friends.
Right.
That was her son from a previous marriage. She actually didn't have any children with Michael. Now, in 1988, John Jr. Aarons was killed in an automobile accident. Now, at a very young age, think about this. At a very young age, Marlene's youngest son, Joe, had lost his brother. His parents had divorced, which means he wasn't seeing his father all the time. So now he's a child of divorced parents. And then he sits there and witnessed his mother being shot. Now, mind you, she was shot in the face. I mean, that's just brutal because he had to go see that from his mother.
Yes.
So it is no surprise that Joe has never spoken publicly about his mother's murder until recently. He really hasn't been involved with the media and talking about this case. I mean, he was just 20 years old when his mom was taken from him. He was an aspiring pilot, and the incident changed his life dramatically forever. I mean, so obviously you can only imagine. I mean, the poor guy, he was struggling with substance abuse. And it's taken him decades to deal with the hurt and the anger that he's had to sort of face in these 20 years. You know, I mean, he's got nobody, the case is closed. He's starting to heal. And then all of a sudden Sheila gets arrested, and now it's kind of brought back into light. So, I mean, he's finally accepted that he might never find out who actually killed his mother. But I think now he kind of just wants some closure.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully he'll get that. I mean, her trial's supposed to start in May of this year, and I will definitely be watching for it because I'm interested to see how that goes down. And I'm actually interested to see what the defense, you know, I hate to say it, but I think the defense, if played correctly, can throw some reasonable doubt in there, to be honest with you. I mean, Casey Anthony got away with it. OJ got away with it. It just depends on who your lawyer is, I guess.
Yeah, you know, you've got to look at the aspect of the defense. I mean, they're continuing it because they want to get as much information to battle. But the prosecution, you know, and as we're seeing lately in some of these cases with two that are really popular, and I'm just going to put out there probable cause affidavits, and everybody listening to this knows the two cases I'm talking about. A lot of times they're going to hold some of that stuff back. What do they call it? Holding it close to your vest.
Yes.
So they're going to keep some of that. Maybe, or I'm hoping the prosecution has something that's like detrimental to her that can really like hurt her case big time. Because I really do think that she was involved based on what I found, but I don't think she acted alone in this. I think Michael played a bigger part.
I agree.
But obviously he's not implemented in any of this, so I don't want to implement him. That's just how I feel based on, again, my uneducated guess and the fact that I do research online, and that's about it. So,
all right, everyone, that's going to be it for tonight. Again, if you'd like to support our show, please subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Palmahawk Media. That's PALMAHAWK Media.
And check out our website for links to all of our social media, our merch store, and much, much more.
And make sure to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening and rate and review us. This really helps us branch out and reach a wider audience.
And thank you, everyone, for listening
to Paradise After Dark.
Dark, 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 dark.